Hey guys, I'm gonna go over the questions that are on the quiz and the questions from chapters 7 through 12 that I will be choosing to be on your final exam. Yes, I went a little crazy and cut my bangs. Actually, my boyfriend cut them for me and they're pretty crooked. It's fine. We're in quarantine. I just wanted to point out that elephant. All right, so let's start from the slide, the PowerPoint slide that says final exam chapters 7 through 12. And I am moving on from slide 1, which looks like this. And we're going to move on to the second slide. So this is just listing Cohen's second half, from chapters 7 through 12 that will be on your final as well. As I explained, they are cumulative, the exam. So, look, just like we're in class. So yes, questions from chapters 1 through 6 will be on your final. Now, I just want to reiterate that, remember when I made those slides of like review questions and then we went over, questions from chapters 1 through 6, and then you guys have different slides for that underneath final exam in your Blackboard. Not all those questions are going to be in your final. I'm just giving you the questions that I choose from. So what I'm going to do is make your final exam with choosing from those questions and choosing from these questions. I am then, after today, so on week 15, I will make available a PowerPoint slide itemizing which questions you should be focusing on. So I know it's like, for example, this has 36 slides and the other slides have a lot of slides too. So I just don't want you panicking, like, how does she expect us to remember 100 slides worth of questions? I don't. They will be filtered down even more, but they will be filtered down with the multiple choice version of the questions. A lot of the questions are not gonna, your final exam is going to vary from like multiple choice, true and false, fill in the blank. So although, for example, one question, like I might have you write down, define mate selection from memory, that question could be in a version of true and false, or that could be in like a fill in the blank, right? So basically what I'm saying is whatever question is there, you should know the concept or the definition that's being asked in that question. So again, basically, these questions are what I'm choosing from for your final. The other questions are what I'm choosing from for your final. I suggest you still study everything to just make sure you know everything. And then once it's filtered down even more, and then if you have all those questions, you basically are going to get 100 on the final. I don't put a lot of questions on it. And I will make another video explaining more about the test once it's done. So I'm going to make the test and I'm going to put those questions on a PowerPoint, combining everything. And I'm not going to give you the blatant question that's on the test, but I'm going to give you, again, I'm like repeating myself. Well, I hope you guys get it. So let's see. If you were able to answer all these questions with no problem, then you are going to be fine. All right, so let's move on. So again, this is Cohen's second half, and we're moving on to slide 3. Mate selection. So I had you guys answer this question. If you guys remember, I did say the discussion board posts are there for you. That's why I make them available, because those questions I also choose to put on your final. So this definition of mate selection is basically relating to what your answer was for discussion board post number 9, in which I was asking you to see how the interaction between self and society can help us understand how relationships basically form the path to family formation, right? So if you choose a mate, how does that later on affect society, right? So we went over that, right? Inclusion, right? Endogamy. If you're going to choose somebody that is your same race, you will most likely perhaps continue, I don't want to say as if it's purposely, but continue forms of inequality. However, if you marry somebody of a different race or a different class, this could lead to further social change. So that's the idea we were discussing in that discussion for chapter 7. But all right, so mate selection, this was on your quiz. And moving on to slide 4, the actual definition from Cohen is the process by which people choose each other for sexual or romantic relationships. So although I had you guys on the quiz fill this out as a short answer, this could be in the form of a true or false. This could be in the form of a multiple choice. So, so just as long as you know what that is, you should be fine. So like I just went over, the process by which people choose each other, necessary for explaining 3 ways the family can influence society. What are the 3 ways? So like I just said, inequality, inclusion versus exclusion, family dynamics. So another thing I just want to bring up is I'm deciding, with me deciding of how I'm going to make the final from these questions, I can ask this in like a short answer. Like, what is one way mate selection influences society, right? So within that, you would pick one of these things and write about it. That's what I could do. Or I could really be like listed 3 ways and have you list all 3, right? So again, I'm going to give you a filtered version of all these questions, but just so you know, like, okay, do I know this? Will I be able to recognize this if I see it? So that's just, So again, these are the review questions for all the everything. This is the review questions for 7 through 12. Not everything was on your quiz. So in your own words, explain how the trends and patterns. So this was discussion board post number 10. I'm just listing here that in this discussion board post, which was reflected in your quiz, to list the 3 central themes of the book, which is diversity, inequality, and social change. So remember those 3 things, because I might ask you a question, which is like, explain, even pulling back to the mate selection question, explain how the path to family formation relates to one of the themes in the textbook, right? So you right there that's kind of a loaded question, because you have to write a short answer, remembering these 3 things, remembering the 3 paths of family formation, and also recognizing mate selection. Not saying that's 100% going to happen, but just remember these 3 things, okay? Diversity, inequality, and social change. All right, so the multiple choice questions. Which of the following is an example of endogamy? This is a review from chapter 8. I'll have you guys kind of think in your head right now. And C, a woman who marries someone within their social group. Endogamy refers to marriage and reproduction within a distinct group. If someone marries someone within their racial group, this is an example of endogamy. So I think you guys kind of know this already. This is also part of the review of chapter 3. One major illustration of the modern changes seen in marriage patterns is that blank has now become an expected stage in relationships for most couples. This is from chapter 8, and the answer is B, cohabitation. And then I have the little bit of explanation there for you guys. All right, review for chapter 9. One skill or resource that parents provide or try to provide for their children is blank, which helps prepare them for future social situations. So this is socialization, B. So basically, the thing that I feel like might be a little confusing to people is, in sense of motherhood, I feel like is like, boom, right there's not the answer. Just so you can remember how to distinguish between the social bond, socialization, social network. Well, number 1, the PowerPoint specifically had this answer next to socialization. I know our definition from it has changed from like the gender discussion to the discussion about parenting. But I mean, the way Cohen defines this in difference to the other ones is that socialization is provided by the children, which allows you to internalize certain elements into your own personality, right? So this helps you prepare for future situations, as it explained here by Cohen. But what I'm trying to say is different from the bond and the networking is that was more focused on not so much internalizing elements to create your personality, but creating bonds with other people, versus the socialization part was strictly about preparing you for certain situations and what to expect, right? So remember this idea of the social script. And then if something doesn't follow that social script of how things are supposed to be or should be, then that creates some kind of stress and tension within yourself as an individual. And that's what relates here to socialization, right? Preparing yourself for how things are supposed to be, versus the social bond and social network is your relationship, right? Your bond with your parents, and then that reflecting into your relationship with other people. So again, this question could be in the form of a true or false. This question could be in the form of multiple choice, fill in the blank. But just know the definition of socialization in the context of parenting and gender. The increase, moving on to slide 15, the increase in women's employment and the increased diversity of family structure changed the cultural view of fathers from the blank to the blank ideal, which emphasizes providing both material support and emotional bonding. So the answer is the male provider and involved father A. So this was from chapter 9, specifically with the chapter on parenting. So if you remember, we usually focus on mothers, but this is the part of the book that spoke a lot more about fathers and how their roles have changed. So similar how, women were working more, and now, with the whole motherhood second shift and the motherhood penalty, etc. There is also discussion about how father roles change. And I wanted to include that because I think it's important for us to recognize that as well. So this will most likely be on your final. Again, I'm going to give you a filtered version of this. But if you recognize that, then that's good. Right? So we went from fathers being viewed as only being the provider, and now fathers are more involved, right? So I think that's pretty easy to understand and move. Let's look at the other answers just to kind of remember how to distinguish it. There was never really jumping D. There was never a cultural view about the single father. That was never even something that was considered a norm. So that's out, right? The absent father right there, boom, that's out. So, even though the three is the same, the three are the same when it comes to this variable B, the first two, single father and absent father, don't really make sense. Those were never norms in American society, at least culturally. And then we have working father, which, yes, okay, went from working father, that was considered the cultural norm, but then let's look at intensive fatherhood, which we never really got into when it came to the PowerPoints, and that was something that was more discussed in comparison to the whole idea of intensive parenting, motherhood, and not really relating to the second half of the question, which is emphasizing material support and emotional bonding, right? So you want to look at the full context of the question to be able to properly answer this question. All right, so we are moving on to slide 17. Kayla decides to leave her lucrative job as a financial analyst to have and raise a second child. The income she will be giving up to raise her child can be referred to as B, an opportunity cost. So opportunity cost is the price someone pays for choosing the less lucrative of available options. So this, the thing about this question, and I probably won't do this on the final if I do choose this question, is leave the option of the motherhood penalty and opportunity cost, because the motherhood penalty is discussed in the book, but it's discussed in the chapter after this. So that right there, if you were just read chapter 9 and were answering the question, you shouldn't have really known what the motherhood penalty is, but you could read this and think, all right, well, this makes sense. Motherhood penalty, she's being penalized for being a mom. However, this is more focused on not so much the motherhood penalty is not so much choosing one option over the other and losing out on the other option, but the motherhood penalty, as in the discussion of chapter 10, was more in terms of you being penalized by having to choose between the two, but not so much focusing on losing the opportunity when it comes to like some kind of financial gain. So I know it's still like, okay, that still sounds exactly the same, but again, if I were to ask this question, I probably will not put it with the motherhood penalty because they are so similar. But specifically for the purposes of this chapter, in comparison to chapter 9, this is focusing on the opportunity cost, right? So when you're choosing the less lucrative of available options. All right, so we are going up to chapter, and just kind of pulling back, like I'm not one of those professors that like, oh my God, I'm gonna put a trick question like this and like give you this and like fill in the blank type thing. You know what I mean? Because I know that's so close to, it could be the parenting course, right? That's arguable. So just know I'm not gonna be like that. And for anybody who didn't really do the reading, you're gonna not even know what I'm talking about, so that's on you. As described by sociologist Viviana, the transformation of American childhood, blah blah, losing their blank value instead of achieving newfound. All right, so the answer is D, economic and emotional. So I mean, this relates to what we've been discussing since chapter 2 about children being used for labor and economic gain, at least more specifically in poor families. And then, with rich families, they were there for you to inherit, people's fortune, and then, be used for some kind of reason of, social value. versus now as time has gone on, we have more labor laws and kids are limited to what they're able to do. Parents are having less kids. So now the increased value of your emotional relationship with your child means a lot now. And that's the whole discussion in the parenting chapter, chapter 9. So, I mean, for those who did the reading, D would be the obvious one for you. I think on the quiz, this was in the form, am I right that it was in the fill in the blank? I don't know. But this is something I would probably do a fill in the blank on. So yeah, I mean, the other questions, I feel like it's kind of obvious that they're wrong, right? So children, okay, you could probably think, yeah, they were material, but there's no newfound labor value of children. So that's immediately out. C, okay, losing their labor value. Okay, that's still arguable. Again, there's no material value to children now. And then, okay, economic, that's, and then the first, and then B, which would be losing their emotional, and that's backwards. So, process of elimination, think of all the major things that we've spoken about, which we're going to go over next week. Research on the independence effect of women's employment on the divorce rate indicates which of these inclusions. I remember I emphasized this in a PowerPoint slide, in a PowerPoint video. And I think this is important because I feel like people think that, especially, I don't want to say especially, but, specifically men can think, or like the larger group of like people like in a consensus perspective of, families are falling apart because women were going on the workplace and now they have this economic independence that they should not have because they should be able to depend on their husbands. And now because of that, divorce is increasing, right? This is negative point of view of something that we've discussed. However, Cohen says that women's employment increases the likelihood of divorce, but only for women who are unhappy in their marriage. So there is still another factor. It's not just that women who work are most likely to get divorced. It's women who work and are unhappy. That's still a variable, although that might not seem like, is that a scientific variable? It is. Why else are they unhappy? So it's not just about you being employed. And then here's a little bit of an example about the research. So at this slide, I think that's important to recognize and to remember that it's not just because women work that there is an increase in divorce. It's because of another factor, which includes their happiness. And then that's also, happiness is discussed in that chapter. All right, so discussion board number 13, I had you guys discuss the 3 different types of work. This is an easy one. If you didn't do the discussion post, like this was like on the first page of the chapter, like everybody basically got 7s on it. Some discussion board posts, I give you a really kind of freebie and just have you do something that's really simple. And then some of them I make you do a little digging, a little bit of work, and have a very specific question sentence from the chapter that I expect you to have read. And this wasn't one of them. So if you skip this discussion board post, that's unfortunate because this is really easy. So I'm on slide 24, and from pages 400 to 401 is where Cohen lists care work, housework, and market work, which I also discussed in this PowerPoint last week. Care work, caring for someone else, house, maintenance in the house, market, working for an employer, right? Some kind of exchange for economic labor. Moving on to slide 25. A blank occurs when the time demands, strains, or obligations of work or family roles make it difficult for people to fulfill their obligations in either row. So the answer is B, work-family conflict. I forget how this was in the quiz, but I would say this could be confusing. Role ambiguity, we never really got into. You could maybe think about gender division of labor, but this isn't focusing on genders, it's just focusing on people. And then the motherhood penalty, again, we're not focusing on mothers, we're focusing on obligations of work or family. And I mean, it's like the answer is like in the question. A blank occurs when time demands make it difficult, work or family, difficult, work-family conflict. So that is an easy one, I thought. And this was a really good topic to write about for your paper number 3, which I'm still grading, so I'm sorry if you're impatient about that. I'm going to have them done before your next paper is due, so you can aim for a certain grade. Slide 27. The overall allocation of work between men and women in society is referred to as B, the gender division of labor. So there you go. Here's a question that is specifically focusing on gender. So the answer is the gender division of labor. And that's the definition that's in the chapter and was on your PowerPoints. trying to see the other answers. Occupational gender segregation can seem as if it would be an answer. However, the occupational gender segregation, if you remember, is included within the gender division of labor, right? So gender division of labor is saying how work is allocated, and then so work is allocated by gender. That's what gender division of labor is saying. And then the occupational gender segregation is saying that men are most likely to do a certain type of work, and women are most likely to do a certain type of work. And that's what the difference is of those two. So again, this is something that I know it's kind of a trick question. If you want to include both gender division of labor and occupational gender segregation, I would most likely not do that to you guys. All right, so these are the newer chapters that we have not had. We're going to have a lecture on this week for week 14. All right, so on slide 29, data on child abuse and neglect cases show that the majority of cases, the perpetrator is the victim's mother. So that's something that is important to know. The most common perpetrator is the mom, the child's father second. This partly reflects the likelihood that children will spend more time with their mothers, and single-parent families are more likely to be headed by mothers. Together, mothers and fathers 80%. So this is important because as every time we've discussed something, remember I've been like, think of everything we've talking about and relate everything, right? When it comes to race and class and cohabiting and relationships and how they're formed. And this is one of those things, like this is like the final chapter, is like a cherry on top that discusses which families are more likely to be abusive, what kind of women are most likely to be abusive. And this is one of those things, like we saw so many factors of how women are most likely to be single parents, etc. And then here we go with another reason as to why the family can be an outdated institution which perpetuates certain inequalities. Right, so if the single parent households are most likely ran by mothers, and they're also more likely to be impoverished, those are also the children that are most likely to be abused, on top of the fact that that they're impoverished, right? This combines, that right there, that thesis, that whole sentence combines like 3 chapters. All right, so we are moving on to discussion board number 14. And which is just, again, a question that I have you guys answering. And, I look at your discussion board posts as possible questions for your final. So in chapter 12, Cohen specifically compares chapter 11 to chapter 12, discussing overlapping institutional arenas. In your own words, briefly explain Cohen's argument. So this is, overall, the question in this phase is like kind of could seem confusing, but if you get to the actual, and in the PowerPoint for this lecture, we'll get to the page number, I forget, but there's a specific part underneath, I think it's under the feminist perspectives, that Cohen says, in chapter 11, we discussed this, and now we're going to discuss this in chapter 12. Skimming through the chapter to find the answer for this, you most likely would have missed it. And I could tell by your discussion board posts who missed it and didn't do an in-depth reading. I think it's easier. I know there's, that's a lot going on right now, but it's so much easier and takes so much less time to just do the reading than to just try to skip the reading and then find an answer and write a paper without doing the reading, because then you're doing more work, honestly. But anyway, so in chapter 11, we discussed how the market arena has taken a role in the family arena, because at first labor and economics and, everything when it came to some kind of employment and labor was happening within the family, right? Old school families, like we saw in chapter 2. And then the market started taking over, right? We started working for outside employers. And then not only that, we also started hiring outside companies to come in and do work for us, right? So you have cleaning ladies, childcare, etc. So that's basically what we mean by the arenas overlapping. And then similar to the state, so similar in comparison to chapter 12, instead of just dealing with a family problem specifically involving violence and abuse within the family, right? So your parents are abusing you and you just don't tell anybody and you just wait till you're 18 to leave the house. Or now the state arena gets involved, right? We have child services and we have domestic violence hotlines. So that's what we mean by, so that's what Cohen means by there, right? So similar to what we saw in chapter 11, where the market arena is overlapping with the family, now the state arena is overlapping with the family, right? So the market arena with the family and state with the family. So that's important. And if you don't get the whole institutional, arena, market, family, and state by now, get it down packed, because that's going to 100%, without a doubt, going to be a short answer question on your final. 100%. All right, so similar to what was in your quiz, moving on to slide 33. Define institutional arena as defined by Cohen and list the 3 arenas. So institutional arena, a social space in which relations between people in common positions are governed by accepted rules of interaction. And then the 3, family, market, and state. So I'm gonna, for your PowerPoint slide, that's like the big filtered, edited slide of, guys, can you please be quiet? The big filter slide of chapters 1. Jalen! The filtered slide of slides 1 through 12. You're going to have less questions to study, but I kind of completely lost what I was saying. But whatever, you're gonna have less questions to study. I'm gonna have a little bit more study guides for you for how to remember this definition of institutional, because you're 100% gonna have to define it. Whether you're gonna have to do like a fill in the blank and be able to put like social space and then like interaction, or define it in like a short answer, I don't know yet. I change it around every year. But remember that. So, right, social space, people in common positions governed by accepted rules, right? These are the kind of, and then family, state, market. So that's basically all the questions for chapters 7 through 12 that I am considering to put on your final. There is nothing different or new that will be from these chapters in your final exam. So no tricks. Chapter 13 will not be on your final. And this concludes the final exam review for the second half of Cohen. So I hope any questions, put it down below so I can explain more. And if you have any questions about anything from chapters 1 through 6, also include that, because next week will be your last final exam of me doing something like this. So if you need something more in-depthly explained from chapters 1 through 6, let me know, because I am not going over them again. Okay? All right. Bye.